We're now going to hear from Wadge Grzelak. That was the hardest bit of the day for me. And he's going to talk to us about exercise and nutrition. And I look forward to having now all been relaxed, we should now be getting motivated and moving. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, hi, my name's Wadge Grzelak, and I'm the medical referral consultant from a centre in Northamptonshire that some of the people here actually go to. Actually, just while the camera's on me for a moment, can I just say hi, Rob? Going on really from what Julie's just talked about, which is that sort of deconditioning process, I'm going to do the opposite, which is talk about the reconditioning process. What I'd first like to do is show you the centre, and I'd like to show you the centre because it demonstrates that there's lots of people out there with lifelong conditions very similar to yours that are, you know, quite able to make the most of their lives, whatever their condition. And what you'll see in this video are people with things like strokes, MS, brain injuries, people that have had joint replacements and all that sort of thing. But they're people that are coping with, you know, lifelong problems. So if we could just show the video. I hope that gave you a bit of insight into the kind of people that use the centre. And this gentleman that you can see here typifies really the sort of people that we see. And I've known Jeff for about 15 years, and he's an inspiration to a lot of people that use the centre, partly because they saw him when he was standing and driving, and knew him through sort of local meeting because he was a farmer, and they've seen him go through a stroke and losing the left side of his body. They've seen him develop diabetes and lose a foot and then his leg. But I think his face says it all, really. You know, he's a man that's still determined to get the most out of life. And as a centre, that's what we aim to do. And that's what I aim to sort of impart with you today. Now, I'm not quite as IT savvy as all these guys that have been on before me, so just excuse me if I do refer to notes from time to time. It was after the last lupus meeting that I attended as a speaker. There was to about 30 or 40 people that I agreed to do this, and I, was told afterwards that it was to about 300 people. After the meeting, we had a Q&A that lasted for over an hour. So I'm really glad there's a few of the speakers to share these questions with today, because we don't want to be here all night. What I do find quite amusing see, I've got nice pictures as well. I've got a few nice pictures actually, well, two. Is that we get a lot of talk in the press about the evidence that's needed to tell us that exercise is good for us. And really the evidence is on the streets, isn't it? It doesn't take a health professional to know that we all need a little bit more exercise. So I'm very fortunate that I'm in this position where I work in an environment with people that want to take exercise. And that's not the case with everybody, of course. I find the majority of people don't cross my threshold. So, my task really today is to turn you guys on to the idea of doing a little bit more activity. Because most people have the idea that exercise means getting out on a bike or going to play football or going to a gym. And whilst that's the centre that I work in, that's really not the message that I'm trying to give you today. The message I'm trying to give you today is just to be very, very slightly more active, because even being very slightly more active has an immediate effect on the body, which we'll hopefully be able to demonstrate. One of my only dilemmas today has actually been really, what can I tell you that's new out there? Because there isn't a lot new in terms of exercise out there. There might be a new aerobics class that you can go to, but how many people go to aerobics classes? Yeah, a few, and that excludes a lot of people. And people that tend to have these sort of long-term conditions, the last thing on their mind is actually going to an exercise class. So, we've got an uphill battle in a sense that we are conditioned from quite an early age by advertising, food labelling, etc. To think that there's quick fixes. I'm sure every one of us here knows a diet that is out there that has an immediate effect and loses loads of weight, but they're not sustainable. It's a bit like buying a bike. How many people buy an exercise bike, it turns up in the house, and then turns into a clothes horse? And that's not just bikes, it's treadmills and all the other gizmos that are out there. There's 1,001 gadgets that you can buy in the home that pertain to make us fit, and people obviously spend thousands and thousands on those sort of things, but inevitably they end up in the small ads or on eBay or something, and get discarded. So I think we need to stop talking about exercise, and we need to talk about just being more active. And the reason I put the picture up there is because just getting outdoors gives the opportunity to be active. It starts that reconditioning process, and that process starts up here. We talked a lot about, or Julie talks a lot about fatigue and that sense of fatigue. Well, that sense of fatigue, of course, largely isn't in your body. It's largely in your mind. So if we want to get ourselves into a position to do more exercise and to be more active, one of the best ways to do that is to get outdoors. And getting outdoors is really important. And many years ago, there was a study done in the 90s, which is 2 decades ago, that demonstrated that by the age of 12, we'd had 50% of all of our daylight. So what that meant was that from that age onwards, we were spending more and more time indoors, which was watching TVs, playing games, playing computers, playing on phones, etc., etc. And of course, that was 2 decades ago, so Lord knows what it's like now with PlayStations and everything else that's out there to distract children. So, if I move on to the next slide, I had to think twice about this one actually, because we need fresh air. Getting out in the fresh air, again, is this sort of first step towards being more active. What are you going to do if you're outside? You're quite likely to be looking around at jobs to do around the house, and you're getting the most important nutrient the body needs. You're getting it from a source that isn't particle dense. Every time we take a breath in the house, what are we breathing in? Breathing in the fibres of our carpets, curtains, and Lord knows what else is in the house. Dog hairs, dog skin, anything you've brushed off lately. But that's what you're breathing in. So when she takes a breath in, she's likely to get a mouthful of dandelion seed, I think. So this is about, I'm talking about preparation for activity, basically. And these are 2 very simple sort of factors that put you in the position to feel like doing a little bit more. And that little bit more really has got to be a little bit more for a lot of you. Some people can do a lot more than others, of course, but it could be something really simple when I talk about activity. And of course, one of my concerns with my clients is I may only see them twice a week. So what are they doing the rest of the week? Because exercise and activity is just stimulus to the body, isn't it? And that stimulus does some pretty important things. Stimulates your blood circulation, stimulates deeper breathing, lubricates your joints, lubricates your brain. So it's really quite critical that this activity is a daily stimulus, rather than it being something that's a once a week class, which might be yoga or aerobics, which they often are. It needs to be daily, and it doesn't need to be a lot. You know, people always assume that you've got to do hours and hours of aerobics or hours and hours on the bike or, you know, go for really, really long walks. It could be that you're just sweeping the drive. It could be that you're cleaning the car, cleaning the windows. They're great activities, you know, but they're activities, they're not exercises. If you want to turn them into exercise, of course, you just do them perhaps a little bit faster. Now, we've had a big chemistry lesson today, with all the drugs that's been thrown at you. So I thought we'd have a bit of physics as well. If we combine activity with the most important force that makes us fit, this is the thing that holds us together. So you can all make a note of this equation. Quite important, quite old, but it makes a huge difference to us all. It is gravity that shapes us. It's gravity that shapes our cells. Without it, what would we look like? We'd be like bits of jelly. It's what creates density in the body. It's what creates density in your muscles. So the more you move, the more effective gravity that you get. Which is why I'm saying that if you're doing something like sweeping or cleaning the windows, the more vigorous it becomes, the more exercise you're getting from it, the more effect you get from it. Now, I see hundreds of sort of gadgets every year that come out that are meant to make us fit. And I did think, what could I bring to this event today that you could take away with you? Not that I'm giving this away, but what could you take away that you would think was really useful, that's practical and simple, you don't need any skills to use, that could make a huge difference? And I really haven't come up with anything over this last few months until last week, and I went to the Leisure Industry Week show where there was thousands of these sort of things going around. A lot of them are not new. They've just been repainted or given a new name, a bit like exercise classes. You know, they just reinvent them. But I did come across one little thing that I thought, wow. And it's not very often that I see that, and I do see a lot of equipment, and obviously I take a lot of interest because I am interested in what people do at home. And I came across a weighted vest. It's very simple, and it tied in perfectly with my bit of a talk on gravity and you doing a little bit more activity, because you only need to do the slightest thing and you get the effects of gravity. You've seen the little trumpet type things that are available, little circular trumpets that people jump up and down on. You know, they never really took off, but that probably was one of the best things that came out for a long, long time. You know, certainly better than an exercise cycle, because there's very little impact on the body, because it acts as a big set of shock absorbers around this trumpet. But you get an amazing aerobic effect, but you get double the force of gravity, because the force of gravity is pushing up against you as well as you pushing it down. So they're a great device. So when I saw this weighted vest, it made sense for you guys, because it's really, really simple. You don't need any skills to use it, you just put it on. And of course it increases the effect of whatever you do. Whatever you did with this vest on, you've heard of the core. You know, most physios, most gym instructors, most Pilates instructors, most yoga teachers will be talking about the core, this mystical part of your body called the core. Well, your core is the set of muscles that keep you upright. And a big group of muscles, very powerful muscles. 2 of them exert about 70 kilograms of force just when you're standing up. Now, I'd defy most people in this room to pick up 70 kilograms. So they're very powerful muscles. And when they are deconditioned, they cause a great deal of problems. And they are deconditioned by the most common thing that we do, which is sitting. And we're just not designed to sit. You can always tell when somebody's deconditioned in the core, because when they get out of a chair, they do this. And when they sit down, they do this. I was just sitting down in a chair, honestly. This little gadget, could I just borrow you, Julie, just to put it on for a second? I bought the heaviest one with me, thinking that I might wear it. But then I thought I'd use Julie. So you might think, well, why don't we just get a backpack and put a backpack on? This is designed so that the weight is proportional across your centre of gravity. So any movement you make away from the centre of gravity is working the core. Is working all of this musculature deep inside you that act on the lower part of the spine, around the pelvis and the tops of the thighs. So any movement, the slightest movement away from the centre is working the core. How great's that? So even when she's walking, it's forcing her to stay upright. Anything that she does, whether it's sweeping the floor, and we're not going to make her do anything. I did threaten.
Can you do 4
Yes, it's bulletproof as well, yeah. 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 Very simple. And they're not widely available yet in this country. And I'm not selling the things. I just saw it and thought, what a great device. Great device that, the kind of clients that I have will benefit from. So I hope it does become widely available. This one wasn't that expensive. I did look at some that were being sort of tested for the military that were about £200 a vest. This was about £37. But it's quite comfy, isn't it? Yeah. Because it's like a sand filling. It just molds to the body. I think it's just good that somebody's taken the time to think through the design of it and the distribution of weight. Because if the distribution of weight, of course, is one way or the other, it'll have the opposite effect and cause a distortion in the body, which is what you don't want. Thanks very much, Julia. I'll take that from you. So we are tight for time. So we need to balance these things out. Your activity only needs to be for a few minutes each day to have an effect. You'll have that immediate effect that you will notice straight away that you'll be more mobile, you'll have more flexibility. There won't be a great physiological change. That takes time. That is a process. But you've got to start that process. And one of the things that Julie pointed out was just doing things for a minute on a bike. I often get these patients that have got things like COPD or chronic asthma that are frightened of being out of breath, when being out of breath is the very thing they need to do. That's what's going to improve their lung capacity. It's going to help the exchange of gases if their lungs are more efficient, if their heart's more efficient. So it only needs to be very, very small, but it needs to be regular. So it needs to be balanced out. So you can see the points I'm making here. It needs to be a daily thing. It doesn't need to be the same thing each time, of course. It could be that you have a routine of doing something on one day, something on another day, something that's a bit more serious, like a walk, where you put a bit of structure to it. So you measure yourself, time yourself, so you've got some baselines to know whether things are actually improving. That in itself will motivate you. There's nothing more motivating than a photograph on the fridge, is there? Something that's black and white, tells you where you started, or the scales. I'm not a big advocate of people jumping on the scales every 5 minutes, that's for sure. But it is good to measure whether you've improved. And of course, above else, these things that you do need to be safe, which is why that's a great device. You're not going to fall off it. I'm running out of time rapidly. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, which is a very big subject, and I'm going to keep this really, really simple, because there isn't a person in this room that really knows that if you live in McDonald's, you're likely to put on lots of weight. The message that I want to convey to you is to do with health. We've talked about the ingredients of health, being good air, being outdoors, being more active. We need to fuel that activity. And you need to fuel that activity with things that grow out of the ground. When people ask me, because obviously a lot of people ask me, I need to lose some weight. And I'll often say, you need to lose some weight because they've got bad knees or whatever it may be. And it will help their condition, particularly if they've got a breathing condition. I know from many, many years, and I'm talking over 30 years of experience, giving people diet sheets, giving them quite specific diets. it's not sustainable. What is sustainable is you knowing what you like to eat and putting it in the right order, putting structure to it, and focusing on things that grow out of the ground, things that haven't got white powder, haven't been made with white powder. Pastries, cakes. Doesn't include chocolate, of course. They've just got to be healthy things. They've got to be natural. And the simple analogy I can give you with that is that, you know, we in Europe we eat about 50% of all the processed food that's manufactured, and we are conditioned by the food labels that are on those packages. But it defies science to think that processed food is cheaper than fresh food. It's got to be handled, it's got to be packaged, it's got to be advertised, it's got to be printed. So the value of the food that you're eating is next to nothing. The nutritional values that are put on the labels are its raw source before it's cooked. The processing of that food folds the molecules of it, particularly the proteins. And if you fold the protein molecules, your body won't recognise them. So they become an incomplete protein and of great, very low value to the body. So we really don't want to be eating processed food. And in terms of losing weight, this is some very, very simple advice. Variety, moderation, and timing. I think what you'll find is that by far the majority of us have an ascending scale of calories going into our bodies these days, which means we start off sometimes with breakfast, sometimes with a lunch, and usually come home to a cooked dinner. Is that right? Is that the norm for most people? Might have a sandwich, lunchtime, but you'll have your dinner. So the scale of calories has done that over the course of the day, when the actual requirement does that. Because you get home from work, you're going to sit down, you're going to watch a bit of TV, and you'll go to bed. So where's the requirement for calories during that course? All we needed at that point was a little bit of protein, perhaps, where we're going to repair our body overnight when we're getting some reasonable quality sleep. So does that tell you anything? It goes back to, back to the 50s, probably when there was the biggest nutritional experiment the world has ever seen, when rationing was introduced after the war. And of course what people did was ate properly at breakfast, they ate properly at lunchtime, they had their dinner at lunchtime. Nearly all factories had canteens, and they came home and had tea. And that's certainly what I'd advocate today, is that you all go home and have tea as opposed to dinner. And think more about the nutritional content of what you put in front of you, rather than whether it's hot or cold. Once it gets past here, it's all 37 degrees. So whether it's a sandwich or a cooked meal, makes no odds. What makes odds to your body and to the condition that you might be coping with is its nutritional value. So let's conclude with a message. If you're going to get treatment, if you're going to take medication, they're of little value if the rest of you isn't looked after. You've got to look after the rest of your body, the things that are working well, in order for those things to be most effective. Thank you for listening.